This is the history of the Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Though it started into the Luxo personal car market late in the game, the Monte Carlo went on to become one of the most popular and best-selling marques in GM history. By 1965, Chevy had a strong lineup, but was struggling to get its answer to the Ford Mustang pony car, the Camaro, out of development, testing, and to market. Chevy was in an uncomfortable spot, with no direct competing car to the Mustang or to Ford's increasingly luxurious and profitable Thunderbird or Pontiac's luxury sporty Grand Prix. Fast forward to 1968. John Z. DeLorean was coming in from Pontiac to become general manager at Chevy and shore up the division's shrinking market share. The Monte Carlo, then coded name the Concours, was to be based on the slightly lengthened A-body or G-body platform, as was the Grand Prix. Design cues from the recently completed redesign of Bill Mitchell's 1967 Cadillac Eldorado was used for the new car in a deliberate attempt to imply luxury.
Monte Carlo for 1970. The new one from Chevrolet at a Chevrolet price. The new Monte Carlo is shown here with all other cars in its field.
By 1969, final designs of the car were being completed, but Chevy was still nervous about bringing a mid to large size car without a four-door option, as the Chevelle, and hedged its bets with a proposed four-door version and a convertible as well. By this time, sales for the Chevrolet division were steady, but both market share and profits were declining. With millions being spent on a new replacement small car for the Corvair and a redesign of the F-body Camaro coming as well as other Chevy lineup replacements for 1970, the budget for the new personal luxury car was stretched, so both four-door and convertible options were dropped, and the car was finalized to be a hardtop coupe only. The final design for the 1970 Monte Carlo was received well, a handsome and completely well-rounded design. The car shared the rear C-pillars and rear window upper panels with the Grand Prix, but the rest, though heavily influenced by the Cadillac Eldorado, was its own. The overall look was well-proportioned, much unlike Ford Thunderbird's odd beak nose and then heavy pseudo-continental design. Though not revolutionary in any way, it definitely fit into an affordable mid-size luxury niche that had not been designed to or catered to before. Car and Driver called it a composite of Buick, Oldsmobile, and Cadillac, i.e. a design success and a coupe for Chevy. Arguably, the car looked more expensive than it was, and Chevy did its best not to brand it a Chevy. Very few, if any, Chevrolet emblems were placed on the car to help promote its upscale image. Sales were very strong and made it a profit leader for Chevy in 1972. For 1973, in an effort to more distinguish the car from its Malibu Chevelle underpinnings, all parts of the previous design were re-emphasized and a new redesign came about. The new look had more punctuated body fender curves, longer hood, more upright A and B pillars, and instead of an operational rear quarter panel window, a purposely emphasized and fixed Opera or Landau roof window appeared. The Opera window, a strong feature of the new design, was a styling cue of the 70s American cars to come, along with the required vinyl top. It was first introduced in the 1971 Cadillac and imitated GM's high luxury car once again as the original Monte had. The theme was aimed to be or resemble a smaller mini Cadillac, and the Landau windows to imitate a limousine or suggest a limo-like look. Headlight prowls, once subtle before, now ran from the mid-hood to the front of the car and grille. The fender curves, previously a suggestion, now protruded as a separate growth of sheet metal and nearly as a separate part of the car itself, continuing through the fender contours and through to the doors of the coupe. Despite some dubious design features, the car's design was wholeheartedly approved by DeLorean at its initial unveiling, whereas the previous car was handsome and somewhat understated in its presence. The new design was much exaggerated and somewhat heavy-handed. Car and Driver jokingly described the Monte's look as Baroque. "Go for Baroque," was David E. Davis's exact quote, as its styling mimicked the overtly and somewhat tacky classical styling theme, i.e. buggy and coach, that were present in luxury cars at the time. Laughable press releases and Chevy press spots emphasized the new Monte's Mercedes-like feel, features, and near Mercedes-like handling and styling. DeLorean was involved with tweaking the handling somewhat, as he was enamored with the 300 Mercedes sedan at the time. New gee-whiz options like the now infamous swivel bucket seats that turned at 90 degrees on its base to meet the driver were offered, and more European controls were featured. Even with the new emphasis on European design, there were fewer options than before. The SS option was gone since 1972, and most performance-minded choices were non-existent. The 454 cubic inch engine was not an option usually picked. Chevy saw no reason to offer what the public weren't buying, so it was eventually dropped. Variations of the 350 and the 400, still a strong motor considering encroaching emissions restrictions, were still available. What was popular was luxury options, such as bucket seats, 8-track players, vinyl tops, or upscale trim. Despite the decline in drivetrain options and the lack of solid design or engineering progress, the public was still enamored of the presentation, and the sales for Chevy's niche of personal luxury cars were steady and strong. Unfortunately, like many American cars of the era, and due to the increasing effect of emissions standards, safety regulations, and fuel economy concerns, the Monte Carlo grew a larger, heavier, longer, and underpowered Malaise-era caricature of itself, much like the Thunderbird it was competing against.
Monte Carlo by Chevrolet. Monte Carlo. It's so special, so drivable, so very personal. You'll probably want to park it yourself.
1976 model, much like its rival, the Ford Thunderbird, grew in length and girth. A 400 cubic inch V8 was made optional to move all that weight, as the 454 was gone, though the standard engine was down to a 305 V8 with a paltry 145 horsepower. The 1976 redesign was mostly a refresher, adding on luxury, along with length and width, weight, and some angular touches to the car. A longer hood and dual stacked headlights. Considering the time frame it was built and sold in the polyester disco 70s, it was better than par for the course, despite the growing malaise of the model and U.S. models in general. It was one of the best-selling Montes for Chevy.
Chevrolet invites you to think of yourself in a new Monte Carlo. Think of yourself surrounded by crisp, sculptured lines. Think of yourself enjoying the very real pleasures of owning a Monte Carlo. Think of yourself surrounded with personal luxury, quiet comfort, and a surprising amount of room. And when you've thought about it, come drive one and put a little distance between yourself and the crowd.
In 1977, Project 77 reared its head. It was a huge investment program for GM, with over $600 million spent towards a 600-pound decrease in weight and 10-inch reduction in length to the General's entire model line, and the Monte was not excluded. The new downsized car, a 1978 model, was at best a caricature of its past self. If the second generation was somewhat excessive in design for its larger frame, the third did its best to try to shrink those same styling cues onto a smaller body, smaller wheelbase, with mixed success. The fender curves were very prominent and flowed directly into the hood, and the taillights, previously horizontal on both generations, became vertical. The dual-stacked headlights of the previous model reverted to large single units. The rear glass and C-pillars were very formal and upright, as was the style, i.e. Cadillac Seville, of most GM vehicles at the time. The combination of all these themes results in a cheeky, chunky look about the car overall. Though not unattractive, initial glances of the design can be called awkward. The Project 77 theme and downsizing was more catered to angular shapes, for example Cutlass Supreme and Buick Regal, and did not lend itself well with the familiar fenders, Coke bottle, and curvilinear shapes of the Monte Carlo as well. Even so, the styling and new smaller size sold well. Engine choices: a 125 horsepower V8, a V6 was offered for the first time, and luxury options. Transmission choices were greatly diminished but not really missed. Considering inflationary pricing and odd-even gas rationing at the time, big V8 engines were not the measuring stick to buyers they used to be. Still, sales were steady, if not flat, until the next generation.
The new Monte Carlo, the most extensively redesigned Chevrolet for 1981. It will be a standout in the personal-size luxury car market, a market that offers you tremendous sales and income opportunity. For 1981, we project that nearly 2 out of every 10 cars sold will be in this class.
1981 in the fourth generation was easily one of the more balanced of the recent Montes. Unlike the previous two, the recognized styling cues, the fender curves, grille, and landau window were more integrated and less screamingly excessive. The look for the entire car was longer, even though it was actually shorter than the previous generation. The Monte's styling cues were there, but much more integrated into the body with more angular haunches in the rear and front quarter than before. The car gained a large egg crate grille and dual vertical headlights too. Engine choices ranged from non-aspirated 229 V6s to a small and rare number of Buick-powered turbocharged 231 V6s and 305 V8s. 1983 brought on the reintroduction of the Monte Carlo Supersport, the SS, with a 305 V8. Although only a small number of SSs were produced this year, it was wildly popular and was the first introduction of a performance option in the car since the 1970-71 Montes. For the next years, the SS model evolved as the popular choice over the more luxurious focused LS and Sports Coupe editions, and sales soared. Changes visually to the overall look were few, except for trim and to enhance the SS look. Even so, many parts of the SS trim were incorporated into the base and LS models to enhance the model lineup. For the SS, power increased and color choices were expanded. In the early 80s, with a power and performance-starved Chevy buying public, it's no wonder that the SS became a sales leader for the Monte Carlo. NASCAR's successful bid with the Monte didn't hurt sales either, as the car racked up wins at the introduction of the sloped back and extremely rare collectible Aero Coupe. Produced to qualify for NASCAR eligibility, brought an air of exclusivity and exotic features to the car. But the writing was all on the wall for Chevy's rear-drive coupe. Declining sales overall for rear-drive personal coupes in the auto industry, along with a demand for the car to come in line with the current industry standards of a more compact and streamlined fuel-efficient vehicle, spelled the end of the Chevy's personal luxury car. Despite a still strong popularity and sales of the SS, in 1987, the last Montes were produced as 1988 models, and the Montes run was over. The Monte's replacement, the Lumina, was introduced in 1990. Other than its rather bland styling and front-wheel drive, there was no noteworthy points to this car, and no carryover elements of the Monte Carlo of the past to this model. The performance model, the Lumina LTZ, was met with lackluster reviews and sales.
Introducing the all-new Monte Carlo, a very personal space designed from the inside out around you, the driver. The all-new 1995 Monte Carlo, genuine Chevrolet.
1995, Chevy, to increase the lackluster image and sales of the Lumina Coupe, renamed the two-door coupe Monte Carlo, reviving the mark once more. Unfortunately, other than the name and a few symbols and logos, not much of the heritage of the Monte Carlo was apparent. Taking hits from the buying public and past fans of the model about the lack of Monte Carlo-ishness of the car, Chevy slowly added traditional styling cues of the original Monte Carlo to the coupe. French stylized fenders reappeared, and night badging and other Monte Carlo's hallmarks showed up on the body and were incorporated. The looks of the car were stronger than ever, and especially since the personal luxury market had been abandoned by Ford and Chrysler at this time, the sales of the car and its popularity unfortunately reflected the public's taste for an affordable priced personal luxury coupe from Chevy. Though the Monte was back and greeted with enthusiasm from Monte fans, sales were not as strong as Chevy would have hoped. By 2000, a full-on SS model with a supercharged V6 240 horsepower was available, a direct nod to the successful NASCAR Monte Carlo campaigns at the time and the popular SS models of the 80s. Sales of the SS model, though limited initially, were very strong and were supported by upgrades in styling and upgrades in power. In 2006, a new small block V8 SS Monte Carlo was introduced, making some 300 horsepower. The first time V8 power had been available in a Monte Carlo since the 80s. Surprisingly, other than the Corvette and as the Camaro was out of production, this was one of Chevy's most powerful cars offered to the public in a long time. And it was based on a now front-drive platform car that had gained its heritage from rear-drive roots. Ironically, the reintroduction of V8 power spelled the end of the Monte Carlo as GM announced that the model would be discontinued in 2007. The model, again, like before, a victim of changing taste, fuel economy standards, production costs, and declining market share. Unfortunately, GM has not commented on whether or not there is any replacement for or revival of the Monte Carlos. We hope to see that knight's crest on a Chevy two-door soon. Well, there you have it, the history of the Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your favorite Monte Carlo year was. Leave us a comment below. Hey, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell for future video notifications. Again, thanks for watching the Boca Brothers Car Reviews.